My name's Nora Priddy, and I'm 13. Music may not solve all problems, but it is my go-to resolution for everything. I hope that this song inspires you to go out there and create. Fall is here, hear the yell, back to school, ring the bell, brand new shoes, walking boots, climb the fence, books and pens. I can tell that we are gonna be friends. I can tell that we are gonna be friends. Walk with me, Susie Lee, through the bark and by the tree. We will rest upon the ground and look at all the bugs we found. Safely walk to school without a sound. Safely walk to school without a sound. Here we are, no one else. We walk to school all by ourselves. There's dirt on our uniforms from chasing all the ants and worms. We cleaned up and now it's time to learn. We cleaned up and now it's time to learn.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Olivia Pierce, a sophomore at Russell County High School. So, first, here's just a little bit about myself. I'm currently a member of my high school volleyball team, FFA chapter, and Y Club. Recently, I have discovered the Face It organization, and I believe in its vision that all children will be free from abuse and neglect. I'm proud to be a part of it because I believe that Kentucky's youth is the future of tomorrow, and protecting and honing their skills will lead to a brighter future for all Kentuckians. So let's just face it, everyone has a role in ensuring communities are safe places for children to grow and thrive. Learning about each community and their circumstances is our best tool to fight the child abuse crisis in Kentucky. The child abuse issue is growing rapidly, just right under our noses. However, by having conversations such as these, we are educating ourselves and gaining knowledge. Through these conversations, we learn that knowledge is power. I don't know about you, but when I learn something interesting and powerful, I'm quick to share it with my peers. The same can be said for this situation. As we have learned more about child abuse and advocated for our Kentucky children throughout this week, knowledge has spread like wildfire. And the more we know, the more we can do to help the victims. So, as many of you know, kids don't come with instruction manuals, therefore, parenting can be tough. However, as a mom to Evelyn, adopted mom to Emma, and a bonus mom to Will and Nate, I'm sure Kentucky's 58th Lieutenant Governor, Jacqueline Coleman, can agree that parenting is one of the most important jobs that an adult can do. Lieutenant Governor Coleman has had the title of an educator, basketball coach, writer, and founder of a nonprofit. But if I had to guess, I would say that her favorite title would just have to be mom. Her nonprofit, Lead Kentucky, ensures that Kentucky's college women are prepared, encouraged, and empowered to seek leadership on their campuses and later in their professional fields. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome the 58th Lieutenant Governor of Kentucky, Ms. Jacqueline Coleman. But first, let's hear a quick word from KY's Executive Director, Dr. Terry Brooks.
Hey, Olivia, thank you so much. Those of you who either did tune in live or perhaps will go back on our media panel, which had the lead writer for the Herald Leader, a Louisville television person, and Scott Jennings, who is on NPR and CNN, the issue they mentioned was the Face It campaign and child abuse. And what is so wonderful about our efforts, even though it's a huge problem, is that is flat out being driven by young people like Olivia in every corner of the state. And I, for one, am convinced that if we're going to tackle that big issue, it's going to be the Olivias of the world who make a difference. So, Olivia, thank you so much for being part of Face It. Thank you so much for caring about all those other young people. And we appreciate it. So, Lieutenant Governor, it's always great when I get a chance to talk to you. I think normally these are supposed to be 30 minutes, but I've already, we'll go a little bit beyond that just because we want to have time to chat. And I always want to give you a platform to get into policy But what I think most animates you in terms of the power and the influence you wield is Jacqueline Coleman on a personal basis. So I want to ask you two personal kind of questions to start out with. Olivia alluded to one. You are managing being a mom and a wife and a professional during these times, as so many people are. My guess is you've learned some lessons. Can you kind of just, first of all, welcome, but secondly, can you open by just talking about what Olivia said, your role as mom? What in the heck are you learning as these days go on?
Well, thank you, Terry, for having me as always. And Olivia, wow, what an impressive young lady. I might have to save this seat for you someday. We'll see. But you're right. There's been a lot through this pandemic that we have all learned, and some of it the hard way. One of the lessons I've learned personally is the importance of the social, emotional, mental health of our young people. That's something that pre-pandemic we kind of talked about, but I'm not really sure that there was a lot of action around it. But what has happened to our kids and our families, I mean, adults deal with this too, with the isolation and the anxiety around this pandemic has really it's taken its toll. And, I appreciate the introduction that Olivia gave me, but when we think about the youth, I've got the gamut in my house.
Yeah.
I have an adopted daughter who's 23. I have one bonus son who's a freshman in college, one who is a senior in high school, and then I have, she's going to be a 1-year-old in a few days at home. And so I see it, whether it's workforce or college or high school or even with early childhood. You think about it, my daughter has never been in public where people didn't have masks on. Think about that, right?
Wow.
And so the impact there, we just have to be really, really aware of all of those challenges, but also we've got to be willing to act. And I think that sense of urgency around these issues has been created through this pandemic for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Well, one of the things that I still have trouble wrapping my head around is, I think I got the years right. It was only in 2018 that you were flying around to school. I mean, the year after that, you were in the primary and then you became elected. So not that long ago that on this date in 2018, you were probably wondering, did you have enough substitute teachers?
Yep.
Who was covering the ball game tomorrow night? And was the cafeteria going okay? So I know one of your jams is schools. You bring both policy and practical experience. I'm wondering, and I have to tell you, even as someone who spent 30 years as a public school administrator, I don't know how I would be operating a school now. I really, that challenges me. I'm wondering from your perspective, Jacqueline Coleman, instead of being the lieutenant governor, is principal of Russell County High School. Meet your principal, Olivia. What are the kind of hopes and worries? What are the kind of questions you would be pondering if you were in a schoolhouse rather than in the state house?
Wow, that's a great question, and you're right. I think right now I would actually be in the cafeteria because it's about 11:30, so that's
exactly.
Where I'd be headed.
Put that food down. Put that food down.
Yeah. I have a lot of hopes, obviously, in terms of learning from what we've been through with this pandemic. Okay, so one of those things that I've noticed from the pandemic, and the pandemic did not create this problem, it just magnified it, is the lack of equity with our families and students in terms of access to technology and broadband and things like that. There is no question that we have large groups of kids in pockets of the state who have fallen behind just because of that. And so we've got to be committed to do better in that circumstance, certainly, because I always hear technology and broadband talked about as an economic development tool, but it's an educational tool. I mean, we can't have school anymore without it. You just can't. We've gotten to the point where it's part of our everyday lives. And so my hope is that we take that more seriously and we act on it, and we work to make sure that our families have those resources that they need. Those are things that I think about in terms of, I'm hopeful. Questions I would be asking, probably, can we do this? when I think about the need to bring kids back in the classroom, because we have to get our kids back in the classroom. Our teachers want to be there. They want to lay eyes on those kids and talk to them and create relationships with them and help them to grow out of this, as well as teach them, because that's what you do every day. But I also think about the safety and the health of either our students or the faculty and staff in the building or the families at home, and finding that sweet spot between health and safety and the pandemic health and safety, but also the physical and mental health and safety of everyone involved. There are probably lots of questions around that. And I don't know that any school has the right answers. And everybody's going to be trying different things based on what their school looks like. And so, that flexibility, that understanding has got to be there, because nobody's been through this before.
Yeah.
And so as we kind of start to move out of this into whatever post-pandemic life looks like, we got a lot of figuring out to do. And so there will be many, many questions from facilities to, like I said, health and safety in two different ways, medical, but also the mental, physical health of our kids too.
Yeah. Okay, great. So in early in 2019, due diligence, I would have to tell you that I knew two of the three Democratic candidates for lieutenant governor pretty well. The only one I didn't was, I kept saying, like, who in the heck is this Jacqueline Coleman? And the very first time that I talked to this Jacqueline Coleman, I walked away thinking, man, she has such a great conceptual frame on leadership. And that's always a topic that has intrigued me. So you and I have talked about that every time we've had one of these conversations. I think it started with Pat Summitt, the legendary University of Tennessee basketball coach, and has gone on to other areas. So as a mom, as a lieutenant governor, as somebody who is seeing the Commonwealth in such a meta-narrative, what are leadership reflections? What leadership principles have been affirmed? What new ones have started popping around in your mind? Because you really know and practice that art of leadership. So I'm kind of interested in letting you riff a little bit about where you sit on leadership in 2021.
To me, there is one lesson that has bubbled up around leadership during this pandemic, sitting in this seat, that I've always known, but I've never experienced in this context. So I'll take it back to my coaching days. And many moons ago, I was at the college level. I was a graduate assistant for the U of L women's basketball team, and then an assistant coach at Center College before I actually became a head coach in high school. And so one of the things I got to do when I was at the college level was recruit. And I loved that. I loved finding talent and giving young women opportunities. And that was something I loved to do. But what I found out really quickly was, kids would send us highlight videos, right? They would send us their, the game with the best stats. And that's what we would see. But when I went to watch them play, I never looked for how they reacted after they hit a shot or after they had a great game. What I looked for was, how did they react when they missed a shot? How did they react when they got taken out of the game, right? Because that tells me a lot more about somebody than what happens in good times. I would say the same is true for the players on my team. You know, I always told my players, if they were sitting here right now, their eyes would all roll in the back of their head because I said it so much. It's never what happens to you. It's always how you react to it that matters, because you can't control the first. You can control the second. And so more than anything, I have learned through this that we have to have leaders who are willing to make the tough decisions in the hard times, and not just lead when everything's fine and there's good news to share and everything's just, hunky-dory. And that's hard. It's hard to make decisions that are going to be tough, that are going to be unpopular, but you prioritize saving people's lives over the popular, convenient decisions. And so we have some people who are willing to do that. I obviously am an advocate for Governor Beshear in this arena, because I've always said he has made every decision during this pandemic as if every Kentucky family was his own. And he has made tough decisions. He has made hard decisions. He has made decisions he didn't personally want to make, but he knew that that was what we needed to do to get through this and to save people's lives. And yet in contrast, we've seen situations where some leaders just let stuff go and they just let things keep going as normal just because we want things to be the way that they were. And there were real consequences that people suffered because of that. And so to me, that whole concept of you've got to be willing to lead in tough times, not just take credit in the good times, is something that has really stuck out to me over the last year.
It's great. Thank you. 2 follow-ups, one a little bit light, one a little bit heavy.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can see my background. So
I can see it.
Would you like to predict who might win the women's basketball NCAA championship this year? Would you like to go on the record?
I think we've got some pretty good teams in Kentucky, but U of L got the first #1 rating that they've ever had. So we'll see if they can hang on to it. I sure hope they can. That would be really cool for Kentucky.
Okay, that's great. That's on the record. Jacqueline Coleman, basketball expert. So you referenced tough times and tough decisions.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no question that there is a climate of toxicity, polarization, bifurcation in Washington and in Kentucky. All week long in every forum, we have acknowledged that, and then we have rejected it, because I am a big believer that, yeah, there are honorable differences, and that's part of civic discourse. But there are so many common frames. It was frankly very encouraging to me when we kicked off our rally on Tuesday that we heard Senate leadership, Speaker Osborne and the governor. They sounded a whole lot more in sync on kids than any headline would lead you to believe. So again, because I love when you just sort of riff a little bit, because I think you teach us a lot and make us think. Talk about that climate. I mean, how do we navigate an environment where, yeah, there can be honorable fights, but there are so many common ground, common sense, common good policies that we've got to get to, and we've got to get to it by the end of a very short session. What are the hot buttons for you that you say, hey, let's get real? Senate leadership, House leadership, you guys are in sync with this administration. Let's move ahead.
Well, you just said a mouthful there. You're right. It is, and I say this as an elected official who is a member of a political party, and taught government and lived in a household where people were involved in state government, and it's always been a part of my life. But man, it is so frustrating and it is so exhausting to watch the nonsense. And that's what I'll call it, nonsense. No one is immune and no one gets a free pass in this. So I would be just as critical of my own party as I would be the opposite party. And it's just, it's so disheartening. And it's disheartening because I think about, like, this is what I think about during this, what happened at the Capitol, at US Capitol a few weeks ago. What is going on right now in Frankfurt. I don't know what I would tell my students.
Mhm.
I taught high school government. They're old enough to understand. They see headlines. They're on Twitter. I don't even know where I would start with how to explain this behavior because I can't justify it. And so I'll just say this, you're right. There are differences, and where we are, where we differ politically, is understandable. I might view the purpose of government different than someone in the other party, but that doesn't make that person evil. That doesn't make that person a horrible human being who just, I can't even talk to. The way that we've personalized that difference of opinion has led us down a path that is not good for anybody. And you're right, when we talk about kids, when we talk about even public education, I don't think public education is a partisan issue. But I think the challenge here is we've got to have the type of conversations that when we differ in a way that will allow us to come back to the table on the next issue. Because if we differ and we dig our heels in and all of a sudden we're calling each other names in the media, we're not coming back to the table again. It's over. And so, it just, one thing I've constantly said during this pandemic is we have to extend grace to each other. We have to. None of us have been through this before. None of us know what is around the corner. We're taking the best advice that we have and we're implementing the best, mitigation strategies that we can. And all we can do is ask people to do the best they can do. It's not unfair to ask the same of our elected officials.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they should be the ones who are the examples. And so I can tell you that there are people that that are elected to office that I disagree with on just about everything politically. If I saw them in the hallway, I would stop and ask them how they're doing and I would talk to them, because one day there will be something that we agree on, that we can come together on, and that we can move forward on. But it's not going to happen if every time I see that person until then, I'm calling them names on Twitter or I'm putting hateful quotes in the paper, knowing that they'll see what I said about them. And first, and while I'm at it, don't say anything on social media or to the media that you wouldn't say to someone's face. This is why I always say kids are actually better on social media than their parents. I've always said that, because they understand, they've grown up with it and they understand how it works. Sometimes I swear, I think adults don't realize that people can see what they type.
Yeah.
It's out there. And so that you're right. That's frustrating. It's exhausting. And, extending grace to each other and disagreeing in a way that will always allow you to come back to that table is the only way we get out of this.
Thank you so much. And just a sidebar to our viewers, I just want to keep reminding you that we need you to be involved. What the Lieutenant Governor just talked about, take the issue that Olivia is passionate about. There are common ground proposals within the state budget. There are common ground policy proposals on the table right now that would begin to mitigate child maltreatment, additional social workers in the budget, support for family advocates, child advocacy centers, changes in the chain of command reporting system. Those are things that are not urban, they're not rural, they're not Republican, they're not Democrat. And that's what Children's Advocacy Week is all about, making sure y'all get into the weeds on those issues and telling your senator and your representative that you expect them to step up when it comes to kids. So sorry about that advertisement, but you just set it up. You set it up too well. So this is a metaphor that, because I like metaphors, it's a metaphor that I actually shared with the governor during our rally. There's a he's kind of like a hipster minister. His name is Levi Lusko, and he's kind of intriguing because he believes that the pandemic resembles the Dust Bowl more than it does the Spanish flu. His contention is that, first of all, the Dust Bowl affected 46 out of 48 states. Yes, Olivia, I'm old enough to know in Hawaii and Alaska were not in the Union. Secondly, he talked about that the impact, over 60% of African Americans were unemployed during the Dust Bowl. Over 35% of folks experienced food insecurity. And he talked about that in an era of hopelessness, the Dust Bowl came wave after wave after wave. There was a first wave, they thought they solved it. There was a second wave, they thought they solved it. And then they got sucker punched by a third wave. But he talked about that the heroes in the Dust Bowl were members of these local groups called the Last Man Standing Clubs. And they had a logo that said, grab a root and growl at the Dust Bowl. So I want to know if you were in the Frankfurt Last Man Standing Club, what are a couple roots that you are, I know in your role you got to be concerned with everything, but my guess is there are a couple aspects of the pandemic that you really want to grab onto and you really want to growl at, not just in the pandemic, but post-pandemic. So what are the Jacqueline Coleman passion roots at the moment that we know you're going to be leading the way for the Commonwealth on?
Well, first of all, I taught U.S. history and I had never thought about that comparison before. And so I'm going to have to go back and look at it all again, because that just like opened my eyes to something new. So thank you, Terry. Mm-hmm. So there are two things that I will, you're right, there are millions of things I could talk about right now, but there are two in particular that are really important to me personally. And one is the disproportionate impact that this pandemic has had on working women. We know that women have left the workforce at an astronomically higher rate than men. The jobs that were lost were primarily held by women. And so there's been a huge challenge there. I mean, I've heard some people refer to this as the she session. That's how impactful it's been on working women. And so there's several reasons for that were not created by the pandemic. So there's not obviously pay equity in Kentucky. And so you can be equally educated and experienced and be a female and make less than your male counterpart for no other reason. And so the lower paying jobs are the ones that disappeared. We have got to make sure that we have safety measures in place, that we have supports in place that will help these women get back on their feet and either get back into the career they had or to upskill for another career. And so I'm really focused on a couple that are female dominated. And as needed as ever right now. One is nursing and one is teaching. These are obviously very female dominated fields, and we are in a situation in Kentucky right now where we have a shortage in both at a time where we can't afford to have a shortage in both. And the second issue that I would say is also a huge leading factor for these women leaving the workforce is childcare and early childhood education. We have childcare deserts across Kentucky. We do not have universal pre-K available to all of our kids. And while this is an education issue, it is a workforce issue. That is the impediment that keeps families to a point where they can only have one income at a time, or when women end up having to choose to stay home instead of being able to work even, part-time or in a more flexible job. And so the workforce development solutions that we're looking at are very flexible. it's training that you can do at home. It'll help get people back on their feet. We're actually going to roll a few things out soon. So I don't want to get ahead of that, but it doesn't do us a lot of good to create new jobs and new opportunities for women when the challenges at home are still the same. And so it really does have to be that we're willing to invest in both ends of that spectrum to be able to get folks back on their feet and to help families. That is something that I have heard over and over and over again from friends of mine, from people across the state and across the country. This is not just a Kentucky problem. It is a problem that is nationwide, and it's a problem that we can fix. There is, again, Tara, you just said this, making sure that our kids have a great start in early childhood education is not a partisan issue. Making sure that we have adequate childcare to support families in Kentucky is not a partisan issue. And we all know that these are real solutions to the challenges that we face. So let's get to work and solving them.
That's great. I think one of the, if there's positives to come out of the pandemic, what we always talked about is that ecosystem for kids, which I think previously it was easy to segment that. Here's early childhood, and here's child welfare, and here's the economy. What we've all learned, as you very articulately described, is you can't talk about the workforce without talking about early childhood. You can't talk about K-12 achievement without talking about pre-K. So I appreciate that view. One of the things that you also, I always kind of make sure I give you a little bit of time to talk about it, because I think A, it's a passion, and B, you're so good at challenging folks. It's pretty easy for people today to go, what in the world can I do to impact Frankfort? I mean, there are new rules, so we're not having a rally in Frankfort. We've been virtual, though interestingly, we've had more folks participate than we ever had in person, which is great news.
That's great news.
But I can't get up there. It's pretty confusing. You got so much political wrangling right now with bills and courts and impeachment processes, that how do you separate that from budgets and policies? And also I think the climate makes people a little bit passive. It's like, can I do anything? So we obviously have the antithetical view, which is this is the exact time when folks have to hear, when lawmakers, when folks in the administration have to hear from Olivia and our partners who are on this call. So talk us up on that. Remind us not only why that's important, but how to go about doing it. How would somebody influence Jacqueline Coleman if they heard something today and they're like, man, I want to tell her what I think about it. How would they go about doing it?
So the first thing that I would say is you do not have to be an expert. You do not have to know everything. I will let you in on this little secret. Nobody in Frankfort knows everything.
That's the headline.
Despite how some of them either think they might or are not aware that they don't. No one here knows everything. I learn something new every single day. And I want to learn something new every single day. I'll just give you an example. I saw the article that was released, I think it was just yesterday, about this is the third year in a row that Kentucky has led the nation in child abuse. And I sent a text message to my lieutenant governor staff and I said, I want to drop everything and figure out how we can solve this. Like this needs to be our charge. And I can't drop everything obviously, but this needs to be something that we focus on. But here's the key. You just have to care. You just have to care about something, whatever your something is, whether it is education or animal welfare. That's another area. Kentucky is last in the nation in animal welfare. So, and I have a feeling those two issues are related. There are lots of ways that we can improve, but your charge should be to find what you care about, learn as much as you can. And when you go to these elected officials, tell them what you care about and why you care about it. And the best advice I can tell you when you have these conversations is, this is what I learned from my principal. Don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions.
Amen.
And so when you can come to me and tell me that, our education funding is in jeopardy and it's detrimental to public schools, and you really want to see our funding increased. And I would sit here and nod my head and go, yep, me too. Yep, me too. So what solution can you offer? What different ways that you see from your perspective could be ways that we could come together and work to solve that problem? And so, and again, you don't have to be an expert to do that. You just don't. You just need to care. And when you go to these elected officials and you show that passion, that's going to resonate with them, because that's coming from here. That's not I've got reports on my desk about workforce development, numbers, and graphs and charts. I can look that all day long, but I want to know how that impacts you. Why is this important to you? And what does it do to your family if we're able to fix X, Y, and Z? Because that's the story that you take to the committee meeting. That's a story that you take to the press conference. That's what makes the difference. So personalize it, believe in it, be passionate about it. Know that you do not have to be an expert, but don't just bring the problem, bring some solutions, some ideas to the table as well.
Okay. I will tell you, you just give me a ring and I'm going to convene Olivia and all of those youth Face It ambassadors. They have pragmatic solutions to that child abuse issue. So,
perfect. I can't wait to hear them.
Okay. So Olivia, I don't want to put you on the spot. We got about 5 minutes, but I don't want to, I'm sitting looking at you and you're pretty animated listening to the Lieutenant Governor. Do you have something you want to ask her? It's okay to say no, but you look like you had lots of brain cells going. Is there something you'd like to ask the Lieutenant Governor before we get off?
Well, it's just been like really good to listen to your points, and like I cannot agree more with we need to put the relationships above the politics and actually learn to listen to each other. I love that. But as far as questions, I think everything I was thinking about has been answered. But
Okay, well, thanks, Olivia. Lieutenant Governor, we got about 3 minutes. I need 1 minute because I want to close on a certain note, but I want to offer you the chance to sort of give us the benediction of our conversation. So as we're leaving, just talk to those folks who are champions for kids in every county in Kentucky who are on this conversation today. What would you like to say to them?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you. You're fighting for what I believe to be the most important piece of the Commonwealth, because it is our future. The kids that are in our classrooms today are our future economy. The kids that are in our classrooms today are going to be raising the next generation of children. They're going to be creating the next generation of businesses. They're going to be, doing all of these things. And the way that we treat them, the way that we lead for them, the example that we set for them is going to impact generations to come. And there's no more important charge than that. And it's a huge responsibility, but it is the most important responsibility that all of us have.
Thank you so much. So, Lieutenant Governor, I want to close with just a little story because I think it's the best summary of who you are. It was about a year ago. I know you mentioned your daughter's birthday is in 2 days. So it was about a year ago that we all had gathered in Frankfort for Children's Advocacy Day. I want to share with our viewers that it was late in the afternoon. There was no press, there were no cameras, but we had a very quiet gathering on the mezzanine to thank the young people, most of whom were involved in the child welfare system. And they had come to Frankfort that day and they had busted it. They had helped set up tables and give out stuff. They had talked to legislators. A couple had even testified. And we were just having sort of a cookies and lemonade into the afternoon. And up to the mezzanine came, I say this very respectfully, but a very pregnant Lieutenant Governor.
Very pregnant.
And if you know the mezzanine, there's not an elevator. So she either had to go up and walk down or walk up the steps. Here's what I remember. And I think I'm going to hold that for a long time, Lieutenant Governor. She took time to talk to every one of those kids. And my guess is every one of those kids had not had a lot of adult connections in their lives in any significant way. And I watched her. She may not have known, but I was kind of watching her. And she took time, and every one of those kids, their face lit up as they had that conversation. So, Lieutenant Governor, I know you do a lot of public things and you're really good at that. But I got to tell you, my favorite Jacqueline Coleman moment doesn't have anything to do with a microphone. It has to do with you on the mezzanine talking to each of those kids and making that day count for them. Thank you so much for the leadership you give. And more importantly, thank you for walking the walk when it comes to Kentucky's kids.
Thank you for everything you do, Terry, and it was an honor to be with you today. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, Children's Advocacy Week moves on. You know that we have a playlist on YouTube. I think we're up to about 20 events. So, I tell folks all the time, this weekend, instead of binging on Netflix, binge on Children's Advocacy Week. I do want to highlight that tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're having a special conversation with lawmakers of color. And we're going to talk about what the Lieutenant Governor alluded to, racial disparities and what we can do about it. So we hope you join us for that. Thanks for being part of Children's Advocacy Week. Olivia, have a good rest of the day, and thanks for making a real contribution to today's conversation.
Well, thank you.
We'll see you.